Hi, everyone out there. We are so glad to be back on the couch this Thursday at 6 p.m. on the Purple Couch. And I am your host, Minister Michele Peake, and my co-host is Dana Campbell.
I'm here.
It's okay, we're live.
Hi, how's everybody doing?
You got to be able to laugh. Sometimes things happen like this. So we are so excited, as I was saying, to be back on the couch, myself, Minister Michele Peake, and my co-host, Dana Campbell. We have an awesome guest on the couch with us. And I'm going to let my co-host, Dana Campbell, introduce her to you. And you want to go ahead and take it away, Dana?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Glad to be back on the couch with Michele, Minister Michele. And we have a special guest today, Apostle Cheryle Richardson. Cheryle, how are you?
I'm doing great. The Lord is good. It's good to see you all again. It's great to see you.
Awesome to see you too. So tell us a little bit about yourself and what you are working on in the kingdom for God.
Oh, wow. So, we met like about 2 years ago, and so much has happened. I remember mentioning to you what the Lord was dealing with me about when we were at that conference. So since that time, we have launched a not-for-profit, which is Judah's Roar Domestic Violence Awareness Initiative. And our purpose is to globally educate ministry leaders, congregations, businesses, etc., even individuals, to the dynamics regarding domestic violence and just how pervasive it is. And so we've established a not-for-profit. We have launched a YouTube channel, Judah's Roar Domestic Violence Awareness Initiative. So it's Judah's Roar DVAI. We have a blog entitled Judah's Roar. So we've been really, really busy. We've been very busy just building. We've just launched an apparel line as well. So we've been really busy in terms of just trying to educate folk. And we were supposed to go to Kenya and to the South Pacific this year, and then COVID happened because we had an assignment to go and educate about 20 churches that are under a bishop in Kenya regarding domestic violence and how to address it, more effectively in their congregations, and then also seminary students in the South Pacific. And COVID has changed all of that, so we'll see what God has for us next year.
Yeah. Wow, you sound really, really busy.
Yeah.
So tell us just a little bit. I'm curious as to what caused you to start the Judah's Roar Domestic Violence Awareness Initiative.
Well, God made me. We
talked about a way of doing that.
We talked about that. We talked about that at the conference. But so I have a history of childhood domestic violence, and then also I've been ensnared in it throughout my early adulthood. And so I have personal knowledge of it. And so I've always had strong feelings about it, and I've always would post randomly, this is wrong, cut it out, that kind of thing. But then about 3 years ago, Karen Smith in California, there was something about her case that just really pierced my heart. That case in particular resonated with me on so many levels because, I'm a former educator. I'm a former alternative school principal. I'm a mental health professional. And so for her to have gone through what she went through, this happened in San Bernardino. This was the shooting that occurred at school where her husband came into the school and shot and killed her in front of her students. And 2 little boys were shot and one of them died. And then he killed himself in the classroom. There was something, all of the cases are horrible, right? Yeah. But there was just something about that. There was just something about that just, it's like, we've got to do something. This is ridiculous. This is ridiculous. The trauma that those children would experience for the rest of their lives, the age that were in the classroom with her, the fact that he was able to walk into the school under some guise of wanting to see her and do that to her. And so it just spoke to me on so many levels, the need for workplaces to be notified of these situations, How oftentimes victims are ashamed and they don't let coworkers know that something's going on. So if they see your ex in the parking lot, they don't know that they should be alarmed or that the police should be called or that they shouldn't be there. So there's so many things that need to be addressed. And that really just lit a fire under me concerning that. And so I think when we met a couple of years ago, the Lord had been talking to me, and it was in my mind to establish a not-for-profit, but I was still listening for direction in terms of what our focus should be, because the need is just so great. So I've been pretty busy since the last time. So.
Oh, that's awesome. And by the way, for those our viewers who don't know, the conference that you're talking about, it was a interfaith domestic violence conference. So it was to be able to educate leaders in and outside of the church with how to deal with domestic violence, because so many times this issue is such a secret issue. It's an issue that a lot of people, a lot of organizations don't want to talk about, particularly the church. And so our eyes were widened over that weekend in terms of being more empowered to help people in the church. Because a lot of people don't know that spiritual abuse is a form of domestic abuse. It's a newer form, a more later form. And so being able to help people to not misuse the word of God when it comes to abuse, we feel like is very important. And so that's where we met you, Cheryle. And you have been unforgettable since that moment. It's exciting to see what you've been doing since that journey with Judah's Roar. So tell me, what strikes you most in the area of domestic violence to where you feel like this is definitely the message? If we don't get anything out there to people with regard to domestic violence, this is the message Judah's Roar wants to get out there. What would that be?
It would be that, as appalling as it is for me to have to say this, that domestic violence is more prevalent within the church than outside of the church, across denominational lines, across racial lines. So all those barriers that we use, to point fingers at each other and say, well, is this denomination, is that race, is all of us. Every last one of us are impacted. And then the United Nations declared it a pandemic 3 years ago, before COVID, when no one knew what a pandemic was. And so now we understand, when you think about the effect that COVID-19 has had, and how widespread a pandemic is, that's how widespread domestic violence is. And that's a horrifying thought. When when you think about that, and if the church is supposed to be salt and light, we can stop looking at the world and wondering why it's so jacked up, because we have got to hold ourselves accountable within our own congregations. And so domestic violence, it encompasses that spiritual abuse piece, but also even the physical and the verbal and the mental, financial and the sexual, all of that is also found. And God wants that addressed.
Yes, he does.
He wants that addressed, and it's not okay. And I think back to years ago, there was a young lady in church. We often focus on the wrong things. Spiritual people, we get wrapped around the axle about things that are not on the heart of God in that season. And so I remember years ago, this young lady was coming to church, and I remember everybody being concerned. I think I've been saved 5 whole minutes. Seriously. I was a baby Christian.
Hot off the press.
I could find the Gospels. I couldn't tell you nothing about Ezekiel and all of them. Okay, so I was that new. And I remember her coming to church, and I remember how disapproving everyone was because she had a boyfriend and she was shacking up. Okay, so she was living with this man. And so they would talk to her, talk about the length of her skirt, wrap a sheet around her, all of this stuff, all of these things that we get stuck on. And then I remember coming to church one day to find out that he had shot and killed her in her sleep. That wore me out. It didn't make any sense to me. I did not understand. And I'm thinking, the way I know God, and I'm a baby Christian at this point, the way I know God, this doesn't line up. How can this happen? How can this happen? And so when you have the enemy coming into church and snatching folk right out of church, that's a problem. That's a problem for me as an apostle. I have a huge problem with this. And so I couldn't understand. We get stuck on things like, you can prophesy to me, right? You can prophesy to me about a new car, you know, a new job, a spouse, or whatever. And God didn't tell anybody that this woman was in danger. He's more concerned about you getting a car than he is about her life and where she spends eternity. That troubled me. And it always has. It always has. So I think back on those kinds of things, and something has to be done. And I don't want anybody to be around me ensnared in that, and I don't discern it.
Yeah, for sure.
So that's my, you know, that's my concern. And then once I discern it, show me what to do. Yeah. And so what drives us at Judah's Roar is that we have to know what to do. The Bible urges us, right, to count the cost. There is a cost associated with it, right? And so we're not sprinkling fairy dust on this. You could get hurt. You could get cussed out, right? You could get punched in the face, assisting someone who's trapped in that. So you want to count the cost and educate yourself and use wisdom in how you move and operate. And not just run out there waving a Bible, talking about I'm going to help somebody and God's going to deliver you. Okay, both of y'all end up in the hospital. Okay, so you need to use some wisdom. We have to use wisdom. And so our focus is on educating people so that they can decide, how involved can I be? Right? Count the cost. How involved? Maybe you can't bring them to your house, but maybe you can tell them to subscribe to our blog where they get a free safety plan template.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? Yeah. Provide them with a resource, direct them to a YouTube channel, direct them to your organization. It's, you know what I'm saying? At least know what the resources are so that you can connect them to someone who is equipped to help them and who is called to help them in that way.
Absolutely.
You know? Yeah. So we don't all have to do the same thing, but we can all do something.
Yeah. I love it. I love what you're saying, because I feel like even in this conversation, not knowing it ahead of time, but it's almost like a call to the church, a call to the church to wake up to domestic violence and how serious it is and how much it impacts the congregation, not even just the congregation, but let's keep it real, how much it impacts the pulpit.
Right.
Because like you said, it doesn't have boundaries. So I think what's important about what we do and what you do, we give kudos to our pastor, our senior pastor, Charles Cato, who gives us permission and freedom, and he believes what we believe in, that it's not of God. Domestic violence is not of God. And we need to be able to have programs like ours, diamonds like yours, inside of our churches, so that people know. And we need to have the dialogues, the conversations.
Yeah.
At Dana can attest to this, at Mount Calvary Baptist Church in Lanham, we have Diamond Sundays. So where the whole message is around domestic violence in terms of, in a positive way, in terms of our pastor preaches that it is not of God, that God has made a way of escape, that in fact, our scripture is 1 Corinthians 13:4-6. Love is patient. Love is kind.
Yes.
Right? It's long suffering. It's not those things that abuse is, but I think victims or survivors are afraid because no one's talking about it. And so the more we can talk about it, which is why we wanted to do this show, Purple Couch Conversations, because we're not afraid to say that if you need help, because there's so many people out there that need help, reach out to get the help. Because I tell you, Cheryl, one of the first things we learned when our program first got started is that a lot of times abusers abuse because they can. And why can they do that? Because the victims are silent. And so having someone like you and having someone like us saying, don't be afraid to speak out, but you have to do it responsibly. And so we believe it starts with education. And so we feel like education is so critical to helping people understand it's just not somebody hitting you in your face. It is actually somebody calling you a name over time, and it's a consistent pattern. It's the financial piece, not giving you access to money. It's the
mental pieces. Emotional and mental. Yes.
The emotional and mental piece, and the spiritual piece. trying to control you with the word of God. Well, God doesn't believe in divorce. And so if you're hitting me in my head and bang me, I'm supposed to stay. God said, don't break the marriage covenant. And what people don't realize is that abusers have already done that.
Right. The covenant
broke the covenant with the abuse.
Right.
With the abuse. And so try to make you feel guilty. So I'm just excited about what you're doing and actually your passion that you bring to it. It's bring a realness to it. And I'm suspecting that has a lot to do with your personal experience with it.
Oh my God, so much. I mean, I look back and I am amazed that I'm still here. Literally. That's not a figure of speech.
Yeah.
On more than one. Okay, so more than one close call. And it was nothing but God that really carried me through it. A kidnapping, the SWAT team kicking my front door in, and being pulled over by police because of what they were doing. Things that it was like I fell asleep and woke up in the middle of this horrible movie, and I wanted my money back. Honestly, it's just like this is not even a good movie. This is a horrible movie. I want a refund. Okay, and so so I thank God for that. And it's important to me that we realize that here's the thing. We can, in the church, we can get focused on whatever part of the vineyard, right, that we feel that God has called us to. And I get that. And that's fine. But there are certain things that affect every single corner of the vineyard, all of them. Domestic violence is one.
Yeah.
Drug addiction is one. Yeah. Human trafficking is one.
Yes.
Whoever your population is, right? And let's say God called you to open an orphanage. Well, why are the children orphans? What happened to their parents? Was domestic violence involved in that? Was human trafficking involved in that? Why don't they have parents? And so these are things that affect us no matter what we think our primary call is. If you're the choir director, right? If you're the minister of music, someone that you are responsible for is being affected by domestic violence right under your nose.
Absolutely.
They either have been, they're about to, or they're in it right now. And it may even be you. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. And so it affects all of us. So there are key things that if we would address them and really hear the heart of the Lord, if we would address them, right, we could make progress in all of these things that we consider our primary ministries. These are things that impact all of us.
Yeah.
You can't go to the grocery store. Go to the grocery store and get in line. Even pre-COVID, and several people in that line are going through this.
Yeah. What would you say, Cheryle, to the people like now? We often ask this of our guests, particularly in series 1, with it being a pandemic going on right now and people being closed in and forced to be with one another. Like, what are some of the advice that you would give for someone who might be going through it right now?
I would say for them to try to resist the urge to totally isolate. Try to stay connected somehow. Develop a code word. I would recommend that anybody that's dealing with any kind of abuse, no matter how mild they might think it is, develop a safety plan. I say this all. I know people probably get tired of me saying it.
It's true.
And people focus on you having a safety plan when it's time to leave. You need a safety plan if you plan to stay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How are you going to stay alive? How are you going to stay alive? How are you going to let people know outside of the house that something is wrong inside the house? How are you going to let your best friend know when they call that everything isn't really okay? You need a code word with a specific meaning for whatever word you're using. One word can mean call the police, they have a weapon. One word can mean is things are starting to escalate. One word could mean I need somebody to come get me. I'm scared. You know what I'm saying? And it needs to be something that the abuser is not going to assign any importance to. But so you have to try to think ahead. Now, for those who would say, well, I love him or her, because men can be victims too. I love him and her, and I'm going to just stay here and I believe God. Okay, so you develop a safety plan and maybe you'll never need it. And that would be an awesome blessing. But if you do, you have one.
At least you have one.
Right?
Absolutely.
So
Cheryle, exactly. So people know that are listening, our viewers, can you name some of the things that people would have in a safety plan? Just a few of the things a safety plan would consist of.
Okay, so a safety plan, my safety plan might not look like your safety plan.
Right.
Maybe you have children and I don't.
Mm-hmm.
You know, maybe Dana has pets and I don't.
Mm-hmm.
And so these are all things you want to consider. You want to plan for the absolute worst case scenario. Now, if this person's been walking around the house brandishing a weapon, killing you is not far off their mind. Okay. How are you going to prevent that? That's the purpose of a safety plan. How do you create distance between you and the abuser so that you can get to a place of safety, right? What are the red flags that your person demonstrates? Because victims know the abuser. I won't say they're abuser, but that denotes ownership, and I have a problem with that. So the person that they're living with or they're involved with, they have learned how that behavior escalates, and they get a sense of when they're in danger. They know that here we go. Okay, that's what kind of day it's going to be. You become hyper vigilant about that. So what do you do? What is your response when they first start to tick up in that behavior? Okay, maybe that's when you reach out and let somebody know things are getting heated in here. Where are you going? Where are the documents that you would need to establish yourself somewhere else? Birth certificates, social security cards, driver's license, things like that. You don't need to have them on the premises with you. They need to be somewhere else. Preferably with someone who is not enamored and madly in love and in awe of the abuser, and not someone who's terrified of them either. You understand? Someone who's pretty steady and they're just holding your documents. That's
non-biased.
And you know, and some money, money for a bus ticket, money for a plane ticket, and you can do that a little bit at a time.
Right.
$2 at a time, $3 at a time. You know what? I'm gonna send Minister Michelle. I'm gonna send her $3 every time I get paid, and I'm gonna say it's for lipstick or something.
Right.
It is for it's for paparazzi jewelry. Okay. It's not
anything. It's for anything else.
It's for anything else. So because sometimes when we're in a bad position, what helps us to, this is my clinical hat popping on my head now.
Right.
What can help us in a tight place is knowing that we aren't trapped, that maybe I'm not out now, but I have a plan that I'm walking through to get out. And that can help you to remain stable emotionally until you can actually exit.
Absolutely.
So you want to think about documents. You want to think about those things. Anything that you feel like you just can't live without, you need to try to get it out of the house under, I don't know. I'm going on my
at a time.
A little bit at a time. This is what you don't do. No matter what. You don't say, if you do that again, I'm leaving. You don't say, I'm going to tell my mom. You don't say, I'm going to tell the pastor how you really are when you're not in the pulpit. Don't do that.
Right.
Don't do that.
Absolutely.
Don't do that.
Wrong advice.
Yes.
Just like we tell people that come in and help within our organization as advocates helping victims is never, ever, and that's why you have to be trained first. We have to go through training and education classes. Dana knows, because you don't want to ever tell a victim, girl, you need to just leave and get on up out of there.
Exactly.
Because the time that a woman is leaving is the time when she's most likely killed. And so we want to be very, very careful about what we say to a victim, even in terms of making it feel like it's him or hers fault. This has been such an awesome conversation, and we only have a few more minutes, but since we have you on the couch, as I want you to put your clinical hat back on, because we are starting up our next women's empowerment support system in January. And we're making the curriculum a lot more robust, right? Like a support group. And so we're going to be diving into the abuser, helping a person that has been abused kind of understand their perspective as a victim, some personality traits that might be there, but definitely in the mind of an abuser. And so I'm curious, two things. Have you ever worked with an abuser before? And if you have, can you share a little bit about the mental makeup of someone who may be an abuser? If you could do that briefly for us.
Okay, so it's abuse is always about power and control. It's always about power and control. And often abusers don't even identify with love. They don't know what that is. They've not experienced it. Okay. And if they've not experienced it, many of them aren't even capable of feeling it, much less showing it to someone. And so they equate having control of you. That's what soothes them. They have a difficult time self-soothing. They have a difficult time hearing no. They have a difficult time having gratification delayed for any reason. They want what they want when they want it. They have a difficult time accepting responsibility when they are wrong. And they really don't think that they are. And they think often that I punched you in the face because you made me.
Yeah.
You know how I like my eggs.
Everything's your fault.
You burned my eggs. It's your fault. Okay.
Yeah.
And so it's very difficult, even clinically, to get through to them. And this is why I tell people, you know, from a spiritual standpoint, don't do the, you know, I don't care how much oil you submerge them in and how many times they say Jesus and how many times they spin around. Okay. There's a lot of work that has to be done internally, and they have to be invested in their own deliverance. God is not going to just magically change their temperament and their personality and their past and their history. They need to be willing, and it's hard. It's hard work. They have to be willing to do it. And here's the key thing. It can't be for you.
Yeah.
It can't be for the victim.
That is a key.
That's important.
That is a key.
Right.
It
can't be to keep you from leaving, okay? Or to calm everybody down, or because I feel bad, because I got caught, because I punched you in the face, okay? That can't be the motivation, because that won't last.
That won't last.
Exactly. Short term.
That's powerful. You might have to come back to the couch, because
we got to keep talking about it.
Yeah, especially
powerful.
When you get into this the mental emotional piece and connected to the spiritual piece. I was just honing in on that same thing that you were saying, but from the victim's standpoint, that person may never change. And that's up to God, right? Because he's the only one that can change the heart of a man or a woman. But you want to be accountable for yourself. And you want to feel empowered for yourself. That God says, I'm more than a conqueror through Christ Jesus, who strengthens me. And so that's between me and my God. And that's why we point people to God as the foundation, because abuse is not of him. And so it behooves us to connect with a God who can bring us resources like diamonds, like Judah's roar. We are the resources that God sends, and sometimes we tend to overlook each other when we are God's hands, right, and his mouthpieces and his arms and legs. And so this has been very, very powerful. I think, Dana, we got to have her back, because I think we should delve definitely more into that mental emotional helping victims and survivors understand their patterns of behavior that may be for self-preservation purposes. That there's help out there, that God has the way of your escape. Tap into him and the resources that he puts around you. And just know that no matter what someone else tries to tell you, you absolutely are a diamond.
That's it.
Maybe not in your eyes, but in my eyes, in my daddy's eyes, I am a diamond. And that can be very foundational for folks. But you may need a place to stay. And so we had the Nihi Foundation on, who, if you need to get out of that situation in emergency, you can call a Nihi Foundation. She can put you up in a hotel for 2 weeks. We can get you some training, get you some food, the things like Cheryle talked about. If you have children, never feel, it's a horrible thing to feel trapped. But whom the sun sets free is free indeed. And your freedom starts from the inside. And will manifest itself on the outside with God's help. And so, Cheryle, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much for this powerful, powerful conversation. It was awesome. If people need to get in touch with you and your organization, Judah's Roar, how would they be able to do that?
They can find me on my Facebook page, Cheryle Richardson, just my name. I have a page, Apostle Cheryle L. Richardson. I have a page, Lion of Judah Global Impact Ministries. We're on Twitter. We're on Instagram.
Okay.
We're on Pinterest.
Okay.
So you can find us, just plug my name in there. It's CHERYLE. We have the YouTube channel, Judah's Roar DVAI. You can subscribe to that.
Okay.
We have the blog that's Judah's Roar. So, what I can do too is go back into the comments when we're done and put some of that information in so that people can find us if they need to find us. But there is help. I want people to understand that there's help out here. It's not like it was 30 years ago. When my mother was going through this, there wasn't, you call the police, you might get beat to a pulp when they left, because all they were going to do was tell him take a walk around the block.
And that was it.
Go get a drink.
Yeah.
Calm down.
Yeah.
Okay. And then he was coming back home.
Yeah.
Then what? And so now there is help out there, and it's recognized that a woman or a person doesn't have to submit to that no one has a right to treat you that way.
That's right.
Okay. And as much improvement as our system needs, it's a whole lot better than what it was.
Yeah.
There's lots of organizations out here, right? We've got social media now. So somebody across the country can help you.
Yeah.
They don't have to be right there in your town. You don't have to worry about that. So there's resources out here. And so people really need to know that. Can I just say something about the safety plan and the 90-day thing? It's on my, I'm sorry. It's just.
No, it's okay.
Okay. So we understand that when you first leave 30 to 90 days, you're in heightened danger. People need to understand, the Lord dropped this in my spirit because I wouldn't have thought of this, but it's not really about what's going on in the victim's life. It's about what's going on in the abuser's life. If they go to jail, for example, and they come out, really 30 to 90 days from the time they're released, because time kind of stops for them. They're stuck, they're incarcerated, it's your fault. So you can't, as much as we want to encourage victims to be celebratory and you're finding your voice and all of that, just know that really for the rest of your life, you need to be mindful. It's like stepping in dog mess. Okay. You can't really get rid of that smell. You need to throw the shoes away because there's always this residue. So there have been instances where a woman may get away from the abuser, and then he goes on to another relationship. That doesn't work. Surprise. He goes on to another relationship. When that one fractures, there was a guy in Canada who circled all the way back around and killed the first one.
Yeah.
This was years after. She had nothing to do with what was going on in his life at that time. But he experienced what he considered a loss. And in his mind, it all started with her. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely.
And so I'm not telling anybody to live in fear. You just have to use wisdom and understand how you navigate life. Just be a little extra careful. Be mindful of your surroundings. Don't get so celebratory that you're not paying attention. That's what I'm saying.
Right. Got you.
I'm so glad we have you on. You've given us great knowledge and some spiritual growth and thought and wisdom in this process. So I thank you, Cheryle. I really do thank you for coming on, and glad we had a mini reunion here.
Yes.
After a couple of years.
We just missing Minister Jean, but I'm sure she's watching because it was four of us. Yeah.
I asked about her.
Yep. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Share this video, pass it around. We just don't want to keep this information to ourselves. We really, really want this information to get out there to be able to help people during this time. And so until we meet again next Thursday, you all have a blessed evening. Bye.
See you later, everyone. Thank you.